Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets take care of business, and I don't care if none of the Heat starters played. It's ultimately another victory for the Nets. We break down Cameron Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Nic Claxton, and the whole crew, plus the rookie debuts for one Dariq Whitehead and Noah Clowney, all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you'll find Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, it's games like these when there's only one option. Win and do it in somewhat convincing fashion. Everybody goes home happy.
Yeah, look, we talked in the pregame preview how we thought the line might, at the time, -4.5 might suggest that, Jimmy Butler might be sitting. Turns out it was, first it was Bam Adebayo that was ruled out really early. Then it was Jimmy Butler ruled out. And now all of a sudden you're playing basically and we already know Tyler Herro's out of the mix. We're basically playing the Heat B squad. And now you're thinking, now you're thinking not only one, they have to win. Yeah. And two, let's hope they can win big on the front end of the back-to-back so they can save some of the guys' minutes. Your motivations and your feelings around the game start to completely change because you're like, well, they should make easy, quick work of this team. And by and large, they mostly did, right? This game is a total get-right spot for this team. 3 losses in a row at home, decimated Miami team. Has to be a W. And when we look back, at game 82 at the final record, we're not going to remember that the Heat didn't have anybody. It's just going to be the Nets won the game. And that, in the end, that's the most important thing.
And I don't know if they'll meet the Heat again later in the season or not. It might only be a 3-game season series, at which point the Nets dominated 2-1 victors in the season series against the Miami Heat, another feather in their cap. And to your point, man, this one, listen, would I say after the first quarter, 26-22, was I still waiting for that next moment? Sure. But the Nets do some extra work there in the second quarter and ultimately pull away in this one. And when you think about the box score in this is probably what you wanted to see. You mentioned the game preview. Wanted Mikal Bridges to kind of be the focal point and then distribute off of him. It changes once all those starters are out for Miami. It becomes, I think, really what you end up seeing. Every single starter in double digits. Now, Mikal did lead all scorers with 24. But you get Johnson with 19, 16 from Finney-Smith, right? Dinwiddie with 14 and a double-double for himself with the assist, and then 13 from Claxton. Like, when you know that you are on paper the better basketball team, it should be this easy. Go out, run your sets, play smart, right? Force a lot of turnovers. Sloppy basketball is going to happen here if you're a team that doesn't really have their rhythm like Miami. So it did flip for me. Once all those injuries come in, you go, well, everybody just get yours and let's get out of here with a win.
I think sometimes too, these players, they know who's playing also. Like they look across the court and they say, this should be an easy win. And that's sometimes, it's not playing down to your competition, but it's sometimes why I think these teams are able to sort of claw their way back in before ultimately like sort of talent wins out. And I think that's kind of what we saw. And Mikal actually said it in the post game. He was talking in the Yes post game and he mentioned, he's like, this is he actually said the words, this could have been a trap game, right? Like they're on the back-to-back, their players aren't playing. You actually really don't hear players say that kind of thing very much. He referenced it. Like they know that Jimmy's not playing. They know that Bam's not playing. And they look across the court and say, we should take care of these guys easily. Whereas, the Heat are going the different direction. It's like these guys are maybe playing for some rotation spots. They're full court pressing at times. I mean, they're really going for it in a way that you actually aren't probably even typically used to seeing, and especially probably not, thinking that you're going to get from this team. So I think there's like this moment or few moments of shock, right, on the Nets part or this isn't maybe as easy as it should be. But ultimately, I mean, A, they just had to win. And B, I think we did see it later where it was like, okay, these guys are trying. We have to step it up. It might get a little sloppy here, but ultimately, I mean, we have significantly more talent than them on the court, and that has to win the day. So I think you can go back and look at the end of these games and say to yourself, well, they should have won by more, or they should have won by 30 and everyone should have played 25 minutes. I can hear that. But in the end, I think like this is basically the expectation. You win by 20, the starters get pulled, and that's really probably that's just a fine outcome. And really where the Nets needed to win here. They just needed to get off the losing schneid. And if they get a schedule, if they get a schedule win, sort of like we thought they were going to get a schedule win against the Hawks, then that's just fine. I think that's just fine. Like, it's hard to log any really complaints about the performance. Like, a win is a win. They did what they were supposed to do here.
No, and you mentioned there the 3-game losing streak, right? And we know early on in this season, they've had some of their own injuries. But then in a game like this, you realize that everybody does have some injuries and every team is going to lose players. So you need to grab them when you can. And the last note here, just from a high level, is also, again, starters against starters, right? You got 5 guys on the floor from Highsmith to Bryant, who, by the way, we talked about him in the offseason, and he was not a guy that necessarily draped himself in glory tonight in his 13 minutes, but massive minuses in the plus-minus category for the starters, right? So toe-to-toe, the Nets starters dominate. Toe-to-toe, they're all plus 23, plus 29, plus 17, right? So it's not even just, I'll add on the little caveat of like, it's not just winning, but it's also having your best be better than their team, right? Like, this couldn't be one of those themes for the Brooklyn Nets where, the bench always outperforms their bench. Sorry. No. Not on a Saturday night. No. Not when it's this depleted of a roster for Miami. You needed all these guys to step up in big ways, and by and large, they did. I think we can get a little bit more into some of these individual performances, and specifically, I think a guy like Cameron Johnson is starting to come along here as he gets back from his injury, and Nic Claxton as well. We'll do that. And eventually on the back end of this episode, talk about a couple of rookies too, all coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, we'll tell you about our friends over at Game Time. When it comes to buying tickets, whether it's sporting event, concert, play, whatever you're going to, you want the ticket buying experience and ultimately the event to be the most fun part. You do not want to be stressing out about prices, stressing about what you're going to see, stressing out just about where you're going to sit. Game Time has solved all this for you. The Game Time app is the very best place to buy tickets for any next big event in your area. If you go to Game Time, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit depending on when you're listening. They have tickets for Bulls at Nets, but you might be listening a little late on that. 11:28 Barclays NBA in-season tournament, Raptors at Nets. Huge game. Tickets on Game Time starting at $13. No excuses, people. You got to get over to Game Time. You can see the view from your seat before you buy. They have flash deals. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
And so as we continue our post-game podcast with the Brooklyn Nets, taking care of the Miami Heat 112-97 at home, and as we mentioned, getting off the 3-game losing streak, we'll also mention that Locked On has launched the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories, and as you know, all the local experts chiming in on all those big narratives. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel. All right, so individually here, Doug, I mentioned there Cameron Johnson just because I want to see him continue to kind of get that rhythm for himself, gets his 4th double-double of his career, his 2nd as a Brooklyn Net. I thought, listen, from the field overall, 8 of 13, just 2 of 6 from beyond the arc. But his game, including the assist category, I know we want to talk Mikal here, but I just, this tip of the cap, because Cameron Johnson is starting to show the all phases of his game that I think you and I agree. Not only does he have it, but he needs to show it because it's critical for this team to have success.
Yeah, it started off really good for him. Hit the first couple threes that he took and was, clearly pressing the issue. I think they all kind of collectively to a bit took their foot off the gas. You like to see the 13 shots were the second most on the team behind Mikal. We have to see not every night big usage from him, but more often than not be in this range, right? Like, he has to be in this range of 13 to 15 shots, probably, especially when Cam Thomas is out of the lineup. Has to be taking these kind of shots. And what you kind of mentioned there to start too, seeing a more well-rounded game, because he takes 6 3-pointers, but 7 just other shots from the field, and that's good too. He has to try to get into 3-level scoring range. It's going to be a little bit more at the rim. Like, he's not a total mid-range guy, though we've seen it from time to time. He's critical. They have to have him spacing the floor. They have to have him just bringing an all-around game. That's like specifically what they paid him to do. The contract was not crazy, but it's good starter money, right? What's that?
It's big enough. It's big enough
Yeah,
that you need to be a performer. Like there's expectations attached to that now.
right. It's like not a max contract or anything, but they paid him probably just slightly above market value because they wanted to retain his services. It was important for, another face of the KD trade to sort of stay with the team. I get it. Like in those are the times that you pony up a few more bucks because it just makes sense from an optics standpoint too. And I'm not saying he didn't deserve the contract. I'm just saying that like there's a reason he stayed in Brooklyn, didn't really test the waters too much when it came to free agency. All in all, he needs to be the third best player on this team, probably, right? I don't think, we're depending on where you want to rank Cam Thomas, right? Like we already have Mikal, depending on where you rank Claxton, because you have much you value the defense. I think we can shift around like sort of best players on the team. He needs to be like an every night contributor where the defense is worried about one, closing him out in the 3-point line, but two, worried that he's going to blow by guys. And I think we're starting to see him getting much more comfortable in the offensive sets in a way that really wasn't there when he first came back from the injury.
Yeah, 100%. So a good performance from him. And you mentioned that he was the one that started it here. So then when we'll go to Mikal Bridges next, I honestly, it's funny, 33 minutes. And I think you said it there in the first segment too. Could I quibble over wanting these guys to play closer to 30 than 33 against a team like Miami? Sure. But in 33 minutes, the 8 of 19, the 3-point shooting, 3 of 6 from deep there, had the 6 rebounds, the 3 assists, the 2 steals, the block, 24-point performance. It made it a lot easier to have a guy like Cameron Johnson start hot here, to have Spencer Dinwiddie really get into that table-setting role that we've loved from him, to have some nice moments from Claxton, to allow Mikal to get into the flow of this game. Because early on, again, 4-point lead in the first quarter. It takes a while for them to push that lead going into the break as well. There was at least a moment where I thought, well, come on now. Like, you're supposed to be a part of the burying the Miami Heat process. And he certainly did. And I think we just have to maybe accept that Mikal Bridges is the kind of player that is in the flow of the game. And he does not identify himself as someone that needs to follow up a 45-point performance with another Howitzer. He can just say, okay, we're here. This team is very beatable and we can do it collectively. I don't need to take over a game like this.
Yeah, it was actually funny. In the first quarter, I actually did what I usually don't do, went over to the box score and was like, has he even done anything yet? And he was 0 for 4 at that point, right? He was 0 for 4. He had no points. And it was confirmed that I had not just, zoned out and missed something that he had done.
Right.
But ultimately, he gets on track. And I think if you look at the shot distribution for him again, which is something we talked about from last game, is that we're seeing a good variety of shots, right? He takes six 3-pointers. He takes, I would say, 5. If you look at the shot chart, 5 mid-range shots. And then he takes something like, 9 at the rim. And that is good for him. We've seen him pressing the issue more at the rim, trying to take guys off the dribble, trying to beat those closeouts. And that's a good spot for him to be, right? Because he can stop and pop in the mid-range. We already know that. I think the 3-point shooting would probably need to be a tick higher, but ultimately we're probably not too worried about it. But if he's able to continue contest or bringing the shots to the rim, I mean, in theory, what should follow is more like he shot 5 free throws tonight, that we should see the free throws tick up a little bit, right? We should see some of that scoring efficiency tick up as these shots probably sort of round into regression rates around where he does. So I like what we're seeing from him. I think we're seeing sort of a guy who wants to be a complete scorer. It's not 100% there every single night, but if you look at the shots he's taking, the shots that he's taking identify as a guy who could get there with just the ball bouncing and in a few more times. And I don't think that's really too much to ask with what we're seeing from him. And ultimately, I think that's a really, really good sign for him.
Yeah, there's a lot of at the rim stuff. Like it feels like an unlucky bounce here or there that he could actually be getting 4 to 6 more points per game, especially in the last couple that he's been out there. The other thing too,
he took 10. I just got the real number because I was doing it on the fly. He took 10 shots in the restricted area tonight.
Right.
Like that's more than half his shots. More than half his shots were in the restricted area. That's a good thing.
And the part of that I was actually going to lean into there is, when you're watching this game, we've talked about before how, okay, especially early in this season, well, Mikal Bridges is not put him in ISO, takes his guy off the dribble, beats his man one-on-one and gets into the paint. But what you saw a lot of was when they set those screens just out at about the elbow, just inside the arc there, he curls off of those as good as anybody and gets himself going downhill. And at that point, it's not about his burst or his speed or his quickness at the basket. It's actually the basketball IQ, because you see him do a little half Euro step, kind of gently navigate himself into the restricted area. And then it's about the floater. It's about getting those little soft touches off the glass. So I actually think, just to your point, we're starting to see the crystallization of what the best version of his game is going to be. You mentioned, am I fine if he takes 8 3-point attempts a game? Certainly. But when you hear Jacque Vaughn talking about 10 for him, or he says about Cameron Johnson, I think we just need to settle into this world where Mikal Bridges is and this is not a one-to-one comp, but it's the Kevin Durant of like, I get to my spot when I get to my spot, and then I get my shot. Make or miss, whatever it's going to look like. He plays at his own pace in a lot of ways, and I think there's an adjustment there, especially for a team that does want to get out and run a lot. Mikal is not a burner, but you find him navigating and finding those sweet spots, and tonight was a good example of playing consistent basketball after that early kind of slow start.
Yeah, and look, it should be easy, right? Like, this is a team that was starting Jaime Jaquez and Thomas Bryant, and
also the restricted area should be easy to get into here.
Right, exactly. Like they should have, like, it should look like this. I mean, we're backing out the part where this Miami team stinks, right? So like the shot distribution should look like the easiest kinds of shots, because theoretically you should be taking the easiest kind of shots against a team that's putting out their B and C team. It's not, you can't ever take points against the guy for doing this, right? He doesn't get to choose who he plays. Like, that's just who they got to play tonight. Like, that's just how it's going to be. But seeing things kind of shake out this way, because this is 2 games now, because he did this more against Atlanta as well. We took more shots in the restricted area against them too. I think we're seeing them try to press this issue. And the way the Nets offense is designed right now, or the players that they have, he just needs to do this. Like, they don't have enough offensive juice. Like, the only way that they can really sort of dial things up is for him to press the issue against opposing defenders. Sometimes it's not going to look amazing. He's not a super strong guy. He's not an amazing at the rim finisher. Like, this is not Kyrie. This is not he's not even Durant. Like, he's not a huge dude. And so it's going to be a little harder for him. But ultimately, these are the kind of shots he should be taking.
And by the way, that's what crystallized it too, because even against some of these B squad players, if you're big enough and physical enough, you can keep Mikal in front of you, right? So he needs to manufacture his way to have some success there. Coming up here in a second, let's not forget about Nic Claxton. Let's not forget about Spencer Dinwiddie, and then even a couple of key role players like a Dorian Finney-Smith, the maybe mixed bag from Royce O'Neal. Again, full team effort on display, plus a couple of rookies getting their first taste of the NBA. We'll get into that here in just 1 second.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. No better time to get in on the action over at FanDuel. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. You bet on the money line, you get the winner that you want, and FanDuel is going to ship you $150 in bonus bets. If you're listening to this Saturday night, Sunday morning before they start, they just took it down. The FanDuel had they had the Nets game up, and they just took it down. Too worried about how much the Nets were going to beat the Bulls by to really keep the bet up there. I think it's going to be somewhere around minus 175 when it goes back up here over at our friends on FanDuel. The app's so easy to use. It's not just this stuff too. It's not just money lines and spreads. They got player props. They got over-unders. They got so much more. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off this season. $150 in bonus bets. Just make that $5 money line bet. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we tie a little bow on our post-game podcast here, and remind everybody that we're live on YouTube, even on a Saturday night, and you know what comes next, the post-podcast podcast. And we always appreciate everybody being subscribed and tuning in over there as well. Spencer Dinwiddie, man, you I think did the right thing, not that you were compelled to by any means, in the start of this season. Always going back to the numbers with Spencer Dinwiddie and the net rating and saying, I know when you watch it, sometimes it doesn't feel like, but a lot of the numbers are driving in this direction. With no Ben Simmons, obviously, it'd be easy, I think, with no Cam Thomas, for Spencer Dinwiddie to overdo it offensively. But instead, it's an 11-assist game for him, gets to the line 4 times, took 7 3-pointers, only had 2 shots that were not from beyond the arc. But I just thought did a great job setting the table, finding his shooters, 14 points in the end. This is, I think, the right blend of Spencer Dinwiddie. If we want to take things away against a weak Miami team, it's Spencer Dinwiddie. You need to always be in this type of mold. Guy pushing for double-digit assists and then knocking down some timely shots when called upon.
Yeah, they're still trying to run some high pick and roll with the bigs, a couple lob threat, a couple that didn't go exactly right, but they were still trying them. That's important for the Nets offense to be able to have that in the bag with rim running guys like Claxton and Sharp. And Dinwiddie has been pressing that a little bit more of late. Again, like tonight didn't always work out. He did have a couple nice looks for back cutters, and overall the vision, he was definitely more in pass mode. You could tell they were trying to beat, because the thing about this is, which is good, is that, and this was not the kind of game where they needed him to attack like weaker defenders or weaker bigs. It was like sort of everyone was weak. So at that point, it was really more about ball movement. We saw really good ball movement sections from the Nets because they were able to just continue beating the rotations, the help rotations, and just keep moving the ball. Like we didn't really have to see a lot of dribble blow bys, and he really wasn't kind of going crazy for that too. Like we've seen Dinwiddie at times, want to get that opposing big into a switch, want to kind of just dribble him and either do the step back three or kind of take him to the rim and get fouled. Didn't feel like he needed to do that tonight, and that's fine. Like I think that we saw the ball movement sort of popping enough, and if that's going to be the kind of game that he needed to play tonight, that's fine. There are going to be times they need him to do more than that, just because the other defensive assignments are just going to be too much for like Mikal, for Cam Johnson. If there's big wing defenders out there, it gets a lot harder. But overall, yeah, like this is the kind of Dinwiddie game you want to see play very within himself. Didn't argue too much, took the right shots, and still was getting in on the lobs, even if they weren't totally connecting.
I think there were some great lob instances here. Ones where Dorian Finney-Smith didn't know he was going to lob him the ball. Beautiful pass off glass. He finished that one for him. One where, Nic Claxton had to kind of catch it at his chest and drop it in. But to your point, in this game, it was enough. And you actually mentioned something over on Twitter early in this one that the Nets got away from, which was, it was like a lot of settling for outside shots here against this particular Miami Heat team. And I think adjusting to that too, this is just an overall game thing. I thought it was a really worthy remark to drill down on. When it's a bad team, this is when you go away from, the outside shooting and we're driven on our threes. No, you should be able to attack and beat these teams up. The Nets did that in the end, but starting out, it was a frustrating point.
Yeah, there was a second quarter stretch where they took like 3 or 4 long threes, and I was thinking, my God, I mean, why? It's like Cole Swider out there. Like, what are we doing? These guys can't beat these guys off the dribble. It was getting late in shot clock. I think they were getting a little confused with the zone, just enough. And I think once they start, and I think the press was actually screwing them up a little bit, maybe even from a conditioning standpoint. It was taking them a long time to get into their sets, and that can lead to long threes because you kind of just start running out of time, right? If you're 6 seconds over the half court line and then 2 passes later, now you're under 10 seconds and you really are starting to struggle a little bit. So I think we saw, I don't know if it's like a little shock or just maybe just getting complacent, but those long threes in the second quarter were so brutal. But that it pretty much went away pretty quickly. They got away from that. Thank God, because I was thinking this is exactly how Miami stays in this game. Like they're like doing backflips with these shots.
The other one too, so I want to get to Nic Claxton. I'm just going to lump it in. Mikal Bridges, he knocked knees at one point. He went down awkwardly. I wasn't even sure. Again, in a game like this, you're at halftime. You haven't put this thing away yet, but I was concerned that he may not go the whole length of this game. And then Nic Claxton also had his ankle, etc. Right? So these couple little things, and it was just a brief reminder that even in games like this, when they're easy wins and check it off, it's like, yep, and also get out of the game healthy because you're on a back-to-back and you have these other things to be concerned with. The last point that I definitely want to make sure we got to here is that in the garbage time, right, this game was one going away. So you get the official rookie debuts of not only Noah Clowney, which isn't surprising because he was healthy and he's one of your young rookies. Other 19-year-old rookie in Derek Whitehead. He's been down in the G League. Everybody knows that. But, man, to see him get out there, gets a foul, gets his first career points at the line, to see him out there healthy and playing basketball in late November, I think that blows the doors off of what you and I were being cautious around this offseason when they drafted him, saying, hey, we know what he could be. We know what the pedigree is, but there was no pressure or assumption we'd see him this early.
I really like that they checked in at the same time. I think that worked out really cool. That was a really cool, just way to be able to do it for them both to check in at the same moment. There's I'm sure there's no favoritism here, but they're drafted back to back. They check in at the same time. They're both super, super young, very raw prospects. We're not going to be seeing a lot of them this year. I think that's pretty clear just by the way things are going now. I mean, they've already dealt with injuries, and these guys, this was sort of just I think a hat tip because they were back up on the 2-way. I mean, they've been really, they're not even making road trips or anything like that. They're being recalled for these home games from Long Island. But overall, yes, I agree with you. The timeline for Derek is fast. I mean, he was playing in Long Island, so this isn't a totally surprise. But just in general, for him to be playing live basketball now and for them to be feeling good enough to just even get him his first little taste of the real stuff here with the big club, it's a cool moment, man. I think there's a world where 5 years from now we're thinking back on the first time these guys checked in, right? When you're a fan, when you do this stuff and talk about this stuff every day, it's cool to think back on the times where, oh yeah, I remember back when these guys checked in when they were 19 years old. An auspicious start, but everything's got to start somewhere. And in terms of just being able to see them for the first time, very, very cool moment.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, man. And I was trying to, I guess it would have been Day'Ron Sharp, right, and Cam Thomas, and there's a different vibe around these now. But we know the experience we went through with those two guys, and you're waiting and you're wondering, and why isn't this player getting more minutes in the Cam Thomas experience? So really cool to see those guys out there. I'm always a fan of that. Other than that, man, the back-to-back here coming up is going to be critical for the Brooklyn Nets. The funny thing about this, and not to go on a sour note, and reminder that we'll be extending over into our YouTube little bonus live session here with the fans for a few minutes after we wrap, is that this game against the depleted Heat team that gets you off the 3-game losing streak only still matters if you go out and win tomorrow. And we're going to be here covering all that. But it's like the game-to-game energy, it's brutal right now because you're hanging on this thread a little bit. And you and I talked about this ahead of this one, like, get this win, because if you don't, there's a snowball that seems to be gathering some ground going downhill.
Yeah, well, this is the part of the schedule that we knew was the softer part. They have to come away with wins. Again, lucky break to some degree, or a lot of agreed to get this as the Heat team that you faced coming off that game at MSG last night for Miami.
Yeah. And
that's just a lucky sort of the way the ball bounces sometimes. Totally agree with you. Have to get a win against Chicago. We will be back again doing the post-game live for the Chicago game, win or lose on that one. So no worries there. But yeah, ultimately, we're in a game-by-game situation with the Nets. They don't really have any laurels to rest on. That's just not how the team is built. They have to win every game that's presented to them as a winnable game. Tonight was definitely one of them. Chicago, even at full strength, is still one of them tomorrow. And that just has to be what it is.
100%. So that'll be at 112-97. The Brooklyn Nets win going away in this one. Only the second time this season that they had a double-digit lead going to the break, and they closed this one out successfully. Next up, Chicago.
Okay, look, we're going to get out of here. We're going to stick around on YouTube. Got a ton of people over here talking that seem to want to get on the action. All good. Put an act at Locked On Nets for some questions over there. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you join subtext.com/Locked On Nets to get in on the talk as well.
All achievements, all earned riches have their beginning in an idea. Why, that's Napoleon Hill.
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow and in a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, 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 yeah. Oh, when the post-game podcast ends, the post-game podcast begins, where we join all of the faithful fans over on YouTube, breaking down not only the most recent game, but a wide range of topics, and especially getting off that losing streak. We tap in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it's the Post podcast where he's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We always thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're always free on all those great platforms. And Doug, we dive in on a conversation here. I think we can talk about the most recent game. I think we got a little bit of a hot button topic coming up right out of the gates here.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to touch on it real quick. This Kevin Durant comment that he gave to Brian Lewis earlier as they come in, because the Suns are coming in to face the Knicks. And he talks about sort of like the trade out of Brooklyn. And he says Durant on the Nets exit. It just wasn't no continuity on who we were as a team. When you want to win a championship, you got to build an identity from day one. It was a lot of circumstances out of the player's control that got in the way. So I just thought that was a curious comment from him. I don't know if it's like a deflection. I don't even know if we should spend time on Durant here, like after a win, but I mean, we did the podcast about the game. I always think it's good to check check back in on old friends and see how they're doing with their new situations. But I always wonder about quotes like this because it's like, I mean, he asked for a trade well before things went totally off the rails, right? In the summer before.
Right.
And I mean, I know the Simmons thing and I just never see, I guess I always wonder why there's never an, I could have also done something differently too. Maybe Durant doesn't see it that way. Maybe Durant did all he did and that's the way it was. But there's never, and I get while he'll never call out other players or anything like that, but I'm always just kind of like, this is why I think sometimes it rubs fans the wrong way. Cause it's like a little culpability wouldn't be the worst thing here, or a little bit of, hey, I brought in these other guys. I demanded these other guys come in that ended up being total flakes, like something like that. I just always get a little confused by the quotes, but I know why they wouldn't say it. But it's also the same reason it feels weird because it's like no continuity. He's definitely not the chief culprit here, but I mean a little something.
But like, if you're there, right? Yeah, like you said, like you're not the number one, problem, whatever. And there's a lot of things, and we talked about those, of course, at length when that was unfolding, and also. You were there though, so it's impossible to detach yourself. To your point though, it's like you never, not about the player piece, but you would think that, and for Kevin Durant or any star in any situation, that the easier response, right? The softball answer is just, yeah, it didn't work out. I wish it had. Like that's the nature of the NBA, right? Nature of sports. You try to bring guys together. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think that Kevin Durant, and we said this at the time, was always much more adept at responding and answering questions and having discussions without ever really putting his foot down on any one side of the line, right? Without ever leaning too hard. Now, Kyrie Irving had a different type of experience with the team and with the city, so that's its kind of own thing. But even James Harden, right? Like all these personalities, I think, navigate those circumstances differently. Kevin Durant is the best at it. But in hindsight, in reflection back, I don't think that he's too concerned, right, about maybe being a little more revealing. And maybe these half truths are like, yeah, maybe I just kind of thought this thing was going off the rails and I didn't love it. And the last thing I'll say, because I know it's, well, why not though? But is that like the reason why Harden ended up there was why Kyrie, why you, like you're all there because of you. So at some point, the moves that get made, like they're because of you. I don't know if Royce O'Neal was the perfect player that you wanted, but they gave a first round pickup to get him for you. Like, so all of these things happen around what you can be as a player and what you can be for the organization. It doesn't make you responsible for the success or failing of it, but it does make it okay to say, like, I was a part of this thing that didn't work out.
Yeah, and I just think we haven't seen like that totally happen at like the other different stops of his career. And that's just that, with the Golden State, he leaves. And, I think like individually, I mean, Durant's one of the all-time best. There's nothing against him there. And when you're at that level, the stakes and the scrutiny get way more than anybody else, right? Like really few other players are having their quotes dissected like this. And I get that like there's probably a certain part of it that feels like that's unfair. It's like, hey, my resume speaks, it all, and I don't need to do it. And he said stuff like that. It's like the resume speaks for everything and I don't need to do anything. It's just, I always just do wonder sometimes about these quotes where it's like, I don't know. You were also on the team and part of the moves and part of the stuff that you wanted happening and part of bringing Nash in, like part of wanting Nash as a coach and like all this other stuff.
Yeah, Kenny Atkinson being fired, like you're
exactly.
part of those
Atkinson
things.
Being fired and the guys getting traded for Harden. Like, were you part of the front office that did it? No. Were you consulted? I mean, I had to have been. Right. Like, there's no other way around it. So I don't know if you can like always just have your cake and eat it too with some of the. It's always some other situation or players or person's fault. And that being said, we'll see how the thing in Phoenix plays out. I mean, it's looking at times good, but there's also like some, Beal hasn't played it all this year and because of the back thing and who knows where it's going. So, I mean, he's been freaking amazing this year though. So like this again, like when you look at Durant, it's like, you're never going to look at the stats and make a case against it because he's awesome. And when he played for the Nets every single night, and I loved watching him. And so I hate to even kind of go negative here because believe me, no one loved watching Kevin Durant more than us. It was amazing to be able to do it for like a long period of time. And that being said, it's always leaves a little bit of a weird taste in your mouth.
Of course, let's hit a couple of these as we got a few start up here.
I got one first. I wanted to.
Go ahead.
I saw a couple good ones.
Yep.
Oh yeah, this one I like just because I
Yeah,
like
that
this.
was
A win is yeah. Sorry if you were
that's
going to
right.
put this one up there.
No,
A
that's what it
win,
is. A win is
a
a win is a
win is
win.
a
We
win is
Doug
a
said in
win.
the podcast, we'll never look back 2 months from now and say, "Now, what exactly was the circumstances?" Nope, sorry, it's in the win column. You don't get to take them back.
Well, I'll say about Jean-Claude, I really appreciate this comment too, because I'll say the amount of people that I've already seen being like, yeah, it's a win, but still, but it should have been this, but it should have been that. Okay. All
Nope.
right. Let's just like enough. Like yeah. Should they have, if someone was like, yeah, they should have won by 20. I was like, well, what if they had won by, or they should have been up 20 at this point? Well, what if they were up 22? Would that have been enough? What about 24? Like, what's the number? What's the number that makes you feel
Exactly.
really good about, oh, Mikal plays 31 minutes instead of 35? I mean, like in the end, it can get. I understand the feeling like you want to go there with this thing because sports fans just turn people into really pessimistic people. But at the same time, like Jean-Claude just summed it up perfectly here. It's like a win is a win is a win. It's a W. They should have won. They did win. You don't get strikes against you for not winning by enough at that point. I don't think.
And I mentioned before about like tomorrow they'll go out the back-to-back. It's Chicago, and we know they're a bit of a mess and what's going on with that, whatever, what their plans are. Great. If they win on a last-second accidental Vucevic tip into his own basket, it's still going to be the same comment. A win is a win is a win by any way that you can get them. And yeah, it has, bigger picture. Where does this team fit in the hierarchy? All that stuff, fine. But you can only win one game in a given night, and the Nets did that tonight. What else did you? You had some good ones up here, Doug.
Oh yeah, I put this one up here because I thought this was funny. This one said, question for you, Doug. I'm gonna say this goes to both of us, I'm sure, but are you personally done with Simmons? Be honest. I'll be honest. I actually know the answer to this. I'm
No,
done with that.
hold on. Be dishonest first.
Well, there's no okay. Dishonestly, here's what I have to say about it. No, I am done having any hope around anything or having any like just wait tills or you'll see or wait till this happens or anything like that. Those parts of like my vocabulary personally, I think Adam's probably the same way here, is those are gone. Like there's no part of me that's waiting for him to come back at full strength. There's no part of me that's waiting for him to revert back to some older version of him. Like I am not pinning any hopes on that. If it happens, that is awesome. That will be great and no one will root harder. But and I'm not rooting against him. Like that would be insane, right? I want him to come back really healthy. I'm just not in the camp of, oh, everything's tracking really good and wait till he's back and you're going to see it going. I just don't know how you can be like that unless you're just, an eternal optimist, and good for you. And that's a great place to be. I think it's a place that's ripe for disappointment and I'm just not ready to go there.
Well, I had going back to prior to the start of last season, I think it was, where I was like, hey, listen, the best thing that you can do is hope that Ben Simmons is healthy and returns to form. That's where you should stake your mind that he can get back there. And it was true. And I meant every moment of it. And unfortunately, over the last season and now the start of this season, I'm very much in lockstep with you that if he comes back, great. But you can no longer, I think it'd be unrealistic to think about what is this team and include Ben Simmons as a part of that equation. It just can't be. Now it's about what are you as this team, as the non-Ben Simmons associated roster, what can you be this season? How can you win games? How can you function? And I think it's the way the coaching staff probably has to look at it too, right? Because we cannot assume, well, let's just wait until he gets back and then we'll be this. No. And that's why, Nic Claxton, that's why he becomes critical. It's why Mikal Bridges and his offensive game, all these guys, like you have to think about it, and why Spencer Dinwiddie and his table setting, right? Like you need to act like you're not going to see Ben Simmons again and be absolutely blown away if he shows back up and looks anything like the player that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I just don't. Again, I guess I would always ask the people that are really, really bullish about the return too, is like, how? I just like, you know what I mean? I just don't understand where. I would love to just hear an honest answer of like where it comes from, because it's just there's just no evidence that it's going to be a sort of just a total and utter turnaround of everything that we've seen over the last 2 years. Again, like this is a long time with Simmons. Like this isn't just a recent thing. This guy has played now. I mean, I just want to get the exact right number so I have it. Okay. In the last 3 seasons, so it's full 2 seasons, and then the first part of this game, he's played 48 total games out of a total of 82 times. I'm doing terrible too. So 164 plus however many the Nets have played this year. So they played 14. So They've played out of 178 games, he's played 48. Like, that's nothing. And I know, and that's 27% of the games he's played in the last 2+ years. 27%. And I know the thing is, well, but there was this. And yeah, well, there was this, and there was this. Okay, great. At some point, all those things add up to being a guy that does only play 27% of the game. How, like your probabilist, if you're looking at this probabilistically, and you said to yourself, what should be my reasonable expectation for the amount of games that Ben Simmons plays from here on out? You cannot, no person that deals with math would ever say more than 50% of the games from now till the end of the season. You just can't. There's no, that's being so bullish too. There's just no reason you should do it. Like, there's no evidence that it's true.
And by the way, I'll tie it back into the Kevin Durant comment just around, remember, like the Brooklyn Nets, the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden era. There was every iteration and foible there within, right? Not successful. On paper, should have been this thing. So at the breaking point of play, and by the way, this is all sides, right? Kevin Durant says, you know what? And his comments, I want out. I want to move on. Sean Marks, Joe Tsai say, do we really want to re-up with these guys? We tried to bring back certain players. At some point, the sample size tells you, like, that even though you think it should be successful, it has not been, and is actually more likely to not be successful. Likewise with Ben Simmons, when you see him when he's healthy and he's playing, you go, he should be a very impactful player for an NBA roster. That's true. Unfortunately, he's not healthy enough on the court enough to be able to not look at it and say it's less likely now than it ever has been that he can be that player.
Yeah.
Other one you had up here.
Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. You can switch off. You can switch off. Go ahead. You go to the next one.
Jonathan, frequent flyer. Can you foresee Devin Booker being an option for Brooklyn, especially considering the his connection with the Twins? Also add Thomas and Claxton to that, and you have a fun starting five. That's an interesting. I'll just say it's interesting to think about Booker and having a connection to two Brooklyn Nets players in Bridges and Johnson, because that's just, these are the return on a trade, and then you actually can look over at one of the best players in the league and go, oh yeah, maybe you would come on over to Brooklyn. Do you have any optimism around this? No.
I don't think he's ever leaving Phoenix. He played. I think he's actually a candidate to never leave just because of what he's been through with the team. He was on the team when they were bad. He was on the team when they made the finals. He's on the team he's actually a big time candidate to go the Steph route of playing through it all from here on out. You know what I mean? Right. Just because he's been through so much different stuff there already, and they've made the owner is rich, and maybe things totally crater at some point. Durant gets too old and Beal can't play. I just think that at that point, he will have been so embedded in the Phoenix life of just being the superstar there, that I think that you would just maybe see him ride it out. Maybe. Now, maybe he gets it and he's like, I want to win a championship. That's so important to me that nothing else matters. Maybe. But I just think with him, it's a little different than some of these other situations because they have been they stunk when he first started. And he played a lot and got to play through a lot of it. And now, I'm just making sure I have the right numbers here. So he's in his ninth season. No, wait. Is that right? Yeah, he's in his 9th season now. So he's already in his 9th season.
Wow.
The end of the Durant run is going to be, he'll be 30 or something like that. And maybe the team resets a little bit. I just don't think it's anywhere close to happening. Like I said, I think he's more of a candidate to be Phoenix, getting retired in Phoenix, and he stays there most of his career. I just think when players have been through this kind of trajectory and through a lot of different stuff, and now they actually have a good owner, right, with deep pockets, he's just not on the list of guys likely to leave anywhere.
Yeah, it's a little more like watching Luka in Dallas with an owner that, hey, I'll always do something. I'll always figure out a way to keep this competitive around you and to bring in other players. Right. So, but I'd take them if they had them. Anything else you see out there? I'll just shout out quickly here with Claude in here, with Ian in here, with My Holy Kings in here, just tweaking a lot of frequent flyers. We always want to make sure that we shout everybody out on our bonus episodes, because even on a Saturday night, man, you guys show up, and that's why we're here.
Yeah. Oh, this guy, I'll put this one from American Cheese. Love these names.
Ooh,
he was saying I'm My Holy King, but I'll say this. Glad we didn't get Herro. He's more injury prone than Zion. We were proponents of going for, if there was a 3-team deal to be had where Tyler Herro came in the door. You and I were on board with that. I am glad probably it didn't happen, but not for the injury reason. I don't think that that is something that he's still so young that I'm not worried about this kind of thing for him. So he's just still only 23. But in general, just like sort of the trajectory wise, I think I'm okay with it not having happened, mostly because Cam Thomas has just ended up being so good that like it's just
That's
like
the
you don't need
difference. Yeah.
you just don't need it anymore. But I thought that was interesting because I kind of forgot about the part where we spent a lot of time talking about Tyler Herro and like during the offseason, and you just kind of forget that those things were just the kind of way you forget the things that used to be important are no longer even on the radar anymore.
And listen, I would love to have been the fly on the wall inside the organization who bullishly said, "No, you know what? We really don't need to. We don't need to get into this conversation around Tyler Herro because Cam Thomas, we believe he's ready to take that next step, and we don't need to invest in a player that's going to have a contract that balloons into the 20 millions, et cetera."
And it just
right?
never, it never presented itself because like they never even were forced to probably even have to think about it because the Dame thing never materializes, right? Like,
Right.
so the only way it was going to ever even happen anyway was Dame. It was like a pass through piece to like, get Dame into Miami. So like when that never happens, again, lucky for the Nets, you just never even need to think about it. But yeah, I just forgot that we just spent a lot of time thinking about it.
By the way, like I'll soapbox it here for a beat. Just when you think about what ends up happening, Dame ends up in Milwaukee, and Drew Holiday gets traded and passed through and ends up in Boston. Like when these moves happen in the offseason, I mean, listen, nobody loves speculating about this stuff more than I do. Like I love getting the weeds on it. I love texting Doug absurd. Okay, I got a 4-team multi-layer trade package here. It all really works out in the end for everybody, especially Brooklyn. But the reality of more often than not, so Dame goes to Milwaukee. Okay. What were the other? Miami? They're left holding the bag there, right? They dangled Tyler Herro as the key component for a trade. Now they got to work him back into the fold. They have to reassess where their season is. If you were the Brooklyn Nets discussing that possibility, then you have to pivot. And you've also acknowledged that our willingness to be a part of that means that we don't have full confidence in our current roster. Almost everybody is on the losing end of those situations. The New York Knicks, and I'm not even knocking them for this, but they're attached to every major star ever for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. This was Giannis. Oh, well, just wait until he gets fed up. Oops, sorry. They brought in Dame, and they bought themselves another couple of seasons before they have to really worry about Giannis again. So, and Tyler's not on the level of those guys. But when you hope and you hang on, and when you go and get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, right? When you dream on those things, it is all consuming and also all destructing if it does not work out. So like I think you and I had agreed this offseason about like the steadying of the ship was a really good move, and not getting over your skis on any of these offseason discussions, I think was smart. Because remember, Dame was on Nets fans' lips for much of this offseason as well. And you and I were very strong in pushing against the idea of bringing him into the Nets, let alone a young player like Tyler.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad they didn't do that. I mean, we were very steady in the do not go for the Dame thing. The team is not on this kind of trajectory, and that's it. Oh, good job by Clash here. You guys, yeah. Adam and Doug, you guys rock. That is no lies detected in that comment.
Okay, hold on, let me check. No, that's
my Holy King says, what about one of the Detroit centers? We all love, and by we, I mean everyone here, but not really me, love talking about centers. I don't know which centers you're talking about. Jalen Duren's not going anywhere. Wiseman and Bagley stink. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure which ones.
But what about one of those stinky centers? Come on. What was that?
I mean, I guess you're talking about Duren, like they're not. He's one of the few guys they can really build around now. It's like him and Cade. Everyone else in that team kind of blows. And the other guys, I mean, completely stink. So I'm not sure. So that's my answer about the Detroit centers. Also, real quick with this Claude, longtime flyer here, especially in the YouTube comments, there's no scenario the Nets are going over the luxury tax threshold, $8 million under now. Totally agree with this. Like, this is something that everyone should also keep in mind when it comes to like signing players, whatever. There's no chance the Nets are going to pay extra if they don't have to, like with this team, and nor should they. Right. This is not the kind of team you go above and beyond for. It'd be totally insane. There'd be no reason except to burn money, and these guys burn some money, but not really. And so I agree with Claude that their team is never going to go above the threshold. So always keep an eye on where that threshold is, and know the Nets are never bringing in any players, at least in the next couple of years, that push them over it, because there'd be no reason to.
And in the short term, I mean, even talk about this most recent game, when you see performances like this from Spencer Dinwiddie and just the short-term value, whatever, it's $20 million. Like, the Nets are going to be really hard-pressed to move off of him over the course of this season. That doesn't mean what they should or could do, but it's just going to be hard for them to even create room in that way as well. One thing I'll mention, just as we'll probably start to wrap up here, and Doug will let me know if he sees anything else that he likes. That on Tuesday is going to be the final in-season tournament game against the Toronto Raptors. There's like a lot. So I know we're going to have you post-game for Chicago tomorrow. We're going to have maybe a pre-game preview as well going up tomorrow. So you want to be in tune for that. But on our Monday going into Tuesday show, the Boston Celtics have fallen down into second position inside of our own group. There are a lot of things happening here for the Nets to make it out of this group stage. It may involve having to have a massive win to be the wild card team or still trying to fight their way forward. So going to be a lot of fun to talk about that stuff. I know that at least some segment of the fan base has been into it and has been tapped into the in-season tournament. So I wanted to make sure I covered that. And then also just reference for you, Doug, the Kai Jones situation is something else I think you and I will talk about at some point here. At least I find this interesting. He exited from Charlotte. He's now talking with teams. We know he had some things he had to sort out, but that is at least an interesting name by my radar based on one key factor: age. He fits the right demographic of a guy that,
I'll tell you what he doesn't fit, and that's the Nets one. And it goes back to actually the Durant thing at the top. Is like the Nets are not interested in bringing guys. They've had too many of these guys. Like there's just no reason to. They are. I cannot imagine a scenario where they are interested in taking on some. I think that's a good example of this. Be like why they might not have been in on a guy like Josh Primo, right? Primo has to leave the Spurs under really terrible circumstances, and the Clippers end up signing him. And should the Nets be a group that wants to take shots on guys whose values at all-time lows? I mean, theoretically, yes, you always should be wanting to do this, especially where they're at this stage. This is just not a team that has any risk appetite for this at all. I mean, when you spend after the Kyrie thing, after to some degree Simmons, I mean, Simmons isn't the same kind of thing. After Harden, after Durant, after Nash, all this stuff.
It's all different versions, right? All different versions.
This team has not signaled any willingness to go after these down and out sort of situations, reclamation projects. I mean, they didn't want to look. They specifically didn't do Ime Udoka because of this. It was we've already had enough of this. We don't need another headline around the team that's negative. We had too many of these. So I just don't think that they're willing to even take tries at guys like this, because I just think that you said culture. That's probably the word they would bat around. I think it's just they don't want the headache. They're not a team that needs to have headaches right now, and any potential headache is just not. Now, maybe that's a bad business. I don't know, but I just don't see it happening.
Sure, yeah. There's always a talent threshold you cross when you go, well, it's worth the headache. I mean, again, you can look at the Nets, you can look at a lot of teams and a lot of sports, right? Oh, but he's not worth it. Oh, I'm sorry, you meant MVP. Guess what? We'll put up with a lot of baggage that can come along with these players. And Kai, at least Jones, to this point, has not crossed that threshold, especially with the recent track record for the Nets. So it's probably a good pushback there. But listen, when you see a narrative pop up, you got to tap into it, guys. That's what the podcast is all about.
Still appreciate everyone for some reason getting Harry Giles in the timeline here. Always appreciated to see some hot Harry Giles talk in the chat. Just day ending and why someone wants to talk Harry Giles. So always appreciate that. I think we're gonna get out of here though. Just as a note, programming notes. We're doing the pre-games and then doing the lives. We are gonna be back after tomorrow night's game also. So no worries there. Make sure you check in on the feed for Sunday morning. For a pregame, we'll get one. Almost positive we'll get one of those up. Also, previewing Sunday's game against Chicago. Some things to talk about. We'll talk about in-season tournament later in the week too. Always really, really appreciate everyone flying here on YouTube. It's awesome. Love seeing people here Saturday nights. I mean, there's lots of ways you can spend your time coming in here, listen on YouTube. We really, really appreciate it. We probably don't say it enough, but we really do. And I will just close up by saying we'll be back again tomorrow after the game talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
I'm not really a pickup line guy, by the way, Doug. I don't know what I do. That's not Harry Giles. That's Harry Styles. We'll see you next time, guys.